Hello, everyone. My name is Tom Munns. For those that don't know me, I am now the executive director of Idaho Ripple Effect, and I am with Lynn House today. Lynn, how are you?
Good. Very good to be here. Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you. Thanks for the time. I really appreciate it. It's been a while since we've communicated. I wanted to make sure, though, that the people knew, like what I told you earlier, the purpose of the video. Um, as you know, we had lost some people that were politically active some time ago, and I don't want to lose anybody else. And I felt like since our beloved Jack Stewart ended up leaving, departing us several years ago, I think that since he's not seen, he's not really remembered. And I didn't know a better way to do that than to offer a tribute to Idaho leaders. And the other thing I think that is important is since the movement has changed so much, it seems to me anyway, where it seemed like we were all just getting along and we were all friends moving in the same direction and we didn't want to eat each other's children, is the phrase I use. I wanted to make sure that people understood what you were all about and who you are. And so, what I'd like to do is to begin by going back, if you don't mind, to talk about where you came from. Were you born here? Did you come here? That kind of thing. So, tell us about that, Lynn.
Well, I was born right across the river in the big town of Ontario, and grew up in New Plymouth. So I'm one of the few locals left, probably in the valley. Not many of us.
And I bet you've seen quite a bit since in that time, haven't you?
Astounding. And
Yeah.
then, I mean, that in my career, I spent 20 years in McCall, and then moved back here from there, and wondering where to light this time after being gone that amount of time.
Wow. So what did you do in McCall?
Well, I'm an industrial forester. I've always been tied to the land, to the woods, to logging, to loggers, sawmills. Been my whole career, and then some. And so, yeah, I understand the dirt, what it produces.
Right. Well, land seems to be becoming more and more of an issue all the time, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Whether the feds own the land, whether the states own the land.
Yes. Oh, yeah. And the management or lack thereof, and that's just it's just grievous.
Yeah, it really is. Um, so tell us a little bit about your uh, upbringing, Lynn, if you want, if you feel like it. Is that something you feel comfortable talking about?
Sure. I grew up on a ranch, and understood, how things work, from what's produced and what it does produce, and when I got out of the service, I was still wanting to be there, but not sure how to do it, and ended up being uh, getting in with Boise Cascade, and the timber industry part of things, and managing a lot of acres from the private side of things. And I dealt with the Forest Service for 25 years.
That must have been
I'm
fun.
managing those projects, lots of fires, salvages, helicopter logging, lots of local loggers. Yeah, so that's been my world, and blessed, totally blessed, and to see a lot of the state of Idaho. In the midst of that, I left corporate world and became an independent logger myself. Traveled to the Canadian border and back, and did that for about 7 years, and had so much fun I couldn't stand it, so I had to come back. But I've seen a lot of this state from in the back roads. I know a lot of them.
It's a beautiful place, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
too bad people found out about us. They don't
yeah.
confuse us with
Really,
Iowa anymore, do they?
no, yeah,
I wish they would. I used to get really
yeah.
bummed, but when people said Iowa, I should go, yeah, yeah, keep going.
Mhm. Oh yeah, I know it. Yeah,
Well, so what branch of the service were you in?
I was in the Navy,
What'd you
and
do there?
Vietnam here. I was in aviation ordnance. I was in flight crew for a while, and chased a lot of Russian submarines around the Pacific, and was in the Vietnam waters and those kinds of places. So, but yeah, it was good duty.
So were there some, I don't know any other way to put it, were there gnarly parts or scary parts or anything like that that you ran into?
Not so much. I mean, it's uh, fairly, you know, pretty peaceable. But we just put a lot of time in the air and seen a lot of water, and and tried to keep tabs on the Russians and what they were up to, and so it was the Cold War, the Cold War era.
Right. Right. Well, I wasn't around then. Whether I was physically, I certainly wasn't there mentally for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. So did you have an understanding of Americanism as a young kid, or is that something that developed over time?
Absolutely. My dad was a combat World War II Marine, and we kind of lived under that discipline, and he never missed a lick to tell us about it. So, yeah. So, no, we were pretty close to it.
Well, that's crazy. Um, so when you were, it's good to be able to know that about family. You know, when I first got politically active, I had assumed that the older people than myself would, of course, be patriotic. I mean, right?
Yeah,
And when I had realized that they weren't, uh,
yeah,
that really kind of set the stage for me. I thought, wait a minute, what the heck is going on here? I mean, I've got people that are, 20 years, 30 years older than me, and they're exhibiting, Marxist traits, not Americanist traits. And so that was really scary for me.
yeah.
Um, so, um, so while you were doing all this logging and things, there must have been a time where you ended up shifting gears, right? Or you were an entrepreneur or something, and then you decided to become politically active, right? How did
No,
all that come about?
you know, uh, I guess naturally for me, and that was Helen Chenoweth
Ah,
and her connections to the West and understanding that, and so that was not a hard transition for me. Uh, so that when she was calling attention to things that were so lacking, and yeah, I was like, wow, this is you know I was tuning in more and more then, and I've dealt with again the face of the federal government for so long, administering timber sales and things, and back then they were even kind of efficient. They actually tried to produce something, and now they produce nothing other than ash. So so yeah, I was I had to face that a lot, and the lack of, I mean, and the hard part about being in private industry, you know, I could accomplish more by myself than the whole district, the Forest Service. I mean, it's just maddening, that they got nothing, they get nothing done,
yeah.
that
Well,
produces anything for the common good.
so were you involved in, and I don't think I was in Idaho at the time when they were shutting down lumber mills.
Oh yeah, I
My,
was through that whole era from when I first started in '77. There were 6 or 7 mills in the region, and others besides our competitors. So I was there for that whole transition of shutdown. And in some ways, as far as that era goes, I was the last Mohican left standing. I was the very, very last, forester on the landscape after 100 years of management, the last one.
wow. So I know this is something that I'm hoping that you know that I know already. But w- what kinds of concerns did you have in the seeing what you did in your profession? Was it like you just said, government mismanagement, of things of that nature? But there's probably something more than that. If there is, I'd like to know. But because I was looking at it more from an environmental standpoint, I focused a lot on Agenda 21 and some of that stuff, and trying to be able to make America to where we can't use resources. Um, why do you remember why they ended up shutting down these mills, or what the excuse was that they used?
Well, there was no more access to the resource,
Oh, they just shut
basically.
down access to it.
So the capital investment that was needed to maintain here was getting tougher and tougher, and you can't come up with that investment overnight. That's why nobody's come back. They say, well, yeah, we ought to make use of it. Well, we can't. The facilities have been long gone. And
So does
so,
so does that mean they were looking for private investors? Is that what they were
well,
looking for?
yeah, and it's always been there. I mean, it was a resource that really wasn't appreciated, and over time, when they withdraw access to those resources, and we really scrounged. I was part of that effort to keep everything alive here when we was down to about 2 mills. I mean, we brought timber up from the Grand Canyon all the way to Cascade, Idaho, trying to maintain some production. I mean, and you can look out the front door of Cascade and see timber who had to haul it up from the Grand Canyon.
Wow.
So that's how ridiculous that got.
Well, because I was in, we used to spend a lot of time up in New Meadows and ski up in Brundage and things before they started building condos. Anyway,
Yeah.
but we started to see, well, we saw logging trucks. They'd be barreling down that hill every hour, it seemed like.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
are they, so with the lumber mills being closed, and I think New Meadows was a pretty popular area for that. Do you know where if they're logging where these logs are going?
Yeah. It was into my area. We started hauling timber into Oregon, into North Idaho. So when you start out with the little logs in the morning, you're going to see the whole dang state, and maybe two states, and all the diesel it takes to get the logs there.
So
There's,
why would they be moving them? Why do
well,
you
there
think
was
they're
that's where the facilities were. There was none left locally,
oh
hardly other.
so they shut them down and then they
Yeah,
force you to be, to be
yeah,
able to wow.
yeah. So when you get in your truck at 3 in the morning, you're going to be in Eastern Oregon, someplace, maybe Pilot Rock or maybe Grangeville. You're going to see a lot of country with that load of logs.
Right. Wow. So when you were
Eh,
go ahead.
So in the old days, you a load, a trucker could get 3, 4 loads a day if you're going into McCall or Cascade or Barber. I even worked at the Barber mill for a bit. I mean, yeah, when there was a sawmill, everybody thinks at Barber Park, such a lovely spot. Well, there used to be a sawmill right there. A couple of them, and Harris Brothers had a sawmill there. Yes. And so that's the beginning of Boise. I understand the history of the region a lot because I've delved into the Idaho country and what it produced over the century.
Wow. Well, because you'd think that, oh, well, there's, Boise Cascade and there's all these other lumber companies and stuff. Idaho should be really solid and into lumber. But then you have here this other side where these mills are
Yeah,
being shut down,
yeah, yeah,
unless they're all just being funneled into, corporate control like everything else seems to be.
yeah. No, and one of the last plants was the Emmett plywood plant, which was a very one of the best plywood plants in the West. And so we ended up going to the desert of northern Utah and eastern Idaho, getting that really rugged desert fir to make plywood. And we did that for 7 years. We actually survived 7 years doing that, finding that material to keep that mill going.
Is it still going now, do you think?
No, it's gone. It's shut down and been rebuilt a few times. There's a mill that's owned by Dame Lumber there now, and it's been rebuilt. It's much smaller scale than what was there. And
So in your
yeah, yeah.
wow,
Go
in
ahead.
your opinion, you think we've suffered tremendously economically because of that? Uh,
Totally. Yeah.
back then and still, do you
And,
think?
and still, because there is still a resource here, there's still private lands that have no market. And I consult for people that own those private lands now. I'm still
Oh,
actually
you do?
working. Yes. So try to help them market as best I can if there is a market, but it's tough.
Wow. Wow. So, I think I think when I first met you, you were a leader or you were with the Oath Keepers, right?
Correct. Yep.
So were you actively involved before that?
No, not really. It was kind of a direction, like I said, the Helen Chenoweth saga and the Bundy Ranch thing and the
Uh-huh.
Oath Keepers and that whole thing just unraveled. And man, it got everybody locally. People were fired up about that, and that was Idaho roots here speaking out. So
Mhm.
that's I got in the front of that as it started happening.
So, if you don't mind me asking, just so people can remember, or we can set the record straight in case people are
Yeah.
taking it to the wrong direction, which we see a lot of today. What do you suppose now? What do you suppose Oath Keepers was for, Lynn?
Well, really, it was, and what drew me to it, they really valued the constitutional principles, and expressed that, in more active ways than people cared for. But at least there was a voice, that was still a relevant part of who we are, and in the West, it kind of came to a head in the Bundy debacle and Malheur and a few other places. But so there was a real demand for activism, to to be noticed, because there's some people understand the government overreach, and again, my experience with you know being challenged by bureaucracy.
Yeah, for sure. So some people will confuse Oath Keepers with the militia, Lightfoot militia, etc. Is there a difference between the two groups?
There's a total difference. It never was the same, and we went through a whole iteration for a while. People were demanding the Oath Keepers be a militia, and the leadership of Oath Keepers said, "No, we can't be." They understood the narrative. They didn't own the narrative, and regardless of that, they still got mishandled by the media with the narrative that accused us of being a militia, and we never were, although we were active. And so that's Jack Stewart came out of that movement. He was in an Oath Keeper meeting, said, we can do a militia, and it's okay, and it's legal, and it's constitutional. And so that in the middle of that whole thing, that's where that came from.
I see. So tell me again, or for the viewers again, the point of the Oath Keepers was to do what? Just to be able to hold government accountable on the areas where.
Basically, yes, and have citizens involved in that,
Mhm.
and again, I always valued, I took the oath, my dad did, lots of my family have, is like, that oath is it's always there until you die.
Right. So is that organization that you're aware of, is that still around?
There's some minimal um aspects, some of it, but I'm not even sure it's the same group anymore. Yeah, it's pretty well since January 6th and all that, and, uh, and those people are just not getting out of prison.
Yeah, for sure. That's pretty scary for a lot of people. Um, so if you So one of the things I've seen in my, I don't know, probably almost 20 years of being active is, there was a certain time where we saw groups just pop up all over the place, right? I mean, you got the Tea Party here, and you got this over here, and you
Yep.
got this over here, and I mean,
Yeah.
none of us are home, right? If we're married, we haven't seen our wives in a week because we're busy going to meetings. Um, uh, uh, we've seen them grow, and then we seem to see them die.
Yep.
So
Yeah. Or change. Yeah.
Yeah, did you see, so you saw a period of exponential growth, right?
Yes.
And then you
Yep.
saw things kind of plateau and then things started to go down, right?
Yep.
So
And
what is,
one of the things we did as Oath Keepers, we had a great radio presence, and a radio net, amateur radio,
uh,
and it was really fun, and people loved it. Well, pretty soon, going back to the Obama years, that people got worried, like, that we're now traceable, and so they killed that. I mean, who's listening now, today, tonight?
mhm.
So that went away and kind of went underground, I guess you can say. Or yeah.
So when we think about, and I don't like to think about this at all, but I think part of the nonprofit that I created, which is part of these interviews, uh, is to be able to have these discussions with people, to have open discussions about, you know, what makes people gravitate to something, number one, but what makes people leave what they had once gravitated to. So we saw this a period of exponential growth, which is inherent in every group, right? I mean, I was a coordinator for the
Yeah.
John Birch Society. You know, I was not immune to what I was seeing there. And when I'm
Yeah.
getting paid to do the job and people are not interested, it really caused me to question what is the motivation for people to keep them engaged. So when we consider the incremental drop off over time, do you have any idea about, or did you think much about why these numbers are dwindling?
Well, it's just, the just a threat of government and saying,
Ah,
we're gonna control this, so yeah, it was a fear thing,
yeah.
like, man, do we need this exposure, and so then you got to find other ways to do things. But and some other things came out of that. I mean, there's some other smaller groups kind of spun out, and there's people's rights and those kinds of movements. And I think and I wasn't a part of that one,
Hmm.
but it had a lot of following, of course, notably. So yeah, so it people were hanging on, but yeah, they just kept being a bullseye. So
They're tired of being a bullseye. I saw that
yeah,
when this whole thing about extremism came out. Um, People just did not like, you're seeing average people, right? Lynn, you remember, it's just
yeah,
it's the regular people. You're seeing professionals, you're seeing CEOs, you're seeing CPAs, you're seeing, people in fur coats and fancy clothes, and you're seeing, plumbers that are knee deep in dried, mud or whatever the hell it is. And they're all meeting together about these same concerns. And I think the people from the outside, they're just not aware of what we're witnessing from the inside. These are just
yeah.
regular people that have had some sort of awakening, whether they were personally affected or not, that thought, you know what, something is seriously wrong. I've got to not only figure out what's wrong with it, but I have to be part of the solution, right?
And and I think back to the summer of love when Antifa was burning down the country, and defund the police was a big deal. And so, that last huge demonstration in downtown Boise of 3,000 plus patriots showed up, told Boise City Council, you're not going to cut the budget, and we won that one. It was one of the last hurrahs, so to speak. But man, they shipped in people. We had people watching. People were shipped in for that, and we've got the receipts on some of those. So yeah, they really didn't want to lose that one, but yeah, it was quite a and people were worried. I mean, people living in their shops, with their shotgun, trying to keep from being burned down. I mean, that was a threat that year.
Well, and now being burned down is they're taking it to a whole different level, aren't they? Now,
Yes, exactly.
now people in Vegas want to paint their roofs blue.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but citizens were really worried that we're going to lose this right here, and they didn't. They stood their ground, and so the activism had a purpose that day, and we prevailed. But yeah,
Well, I think it's important that, it's one of those things where I've been loosely affiliated with a lot of the groups. Attending wherever I can and trying to learn about who people are and what they do. It's interesting to be able to learn about some of the successes that some of these groups have. And that's obviously one of my questions. And you've actually nailed that before I even asked, which was great. Because I think it's important that if people are going to be in a movement, we have to understand that there's a whole lot of time involved. You can't just go wave your flag at a
yeah,
tea party meeting and all of a sudden it's like waving a magic wand. You've all of a sudden got your freedom back. I think that
right.
was one of the problems that I saw with the Tea Party is I think we all assumed that if 4,000 of us descended on the Capitol, they would have freaked out and they would have given us everything back that we wanted,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yes, yeah.
So, wow. Did you have any other notable successes or anything that you could mention, maybe?
Oh, not so much. It's just a matter of just responding. And people wanted somebody to stand up there and be you know be the one that put it all together, and kind of coordinated things and had a face. But I did go to Nevada. I didn't go to Malheur. I wasn't in that line of fire, and didn't think I needed that. But I know people that were, and I give them credit, for living what they believed.
Yeah, I was thinking about going and my wife's like, "Nah, you probably shouldn't go."
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was kind of a good thing I didn't go, and it really didn't end up being my thing anyway. And sometimes I
Yeah.
think that, we're our own worst enemies, or it's easy for us to point fingers. And I didn't really want to do that. I think maybe I might have done things differently or whatever, but who am I? I mean, I'm a
Yeah.
guy that really wasn't personally affected. I mean, Ammon Bundy and his family were directly affected. The Hage family was directly affected. These
Yes.
people have been directly
Yep.
affected. Who am I to be able to say what the proper response is and what it isn't? It's just to be able to
Exactly.
acknowledge it. So I think in saying, whether people have, long laundry lists of successes or not, I think the one thing that we can agree on is we were there. We
Yeah. Yeah.
occupied a space when nobody else did, and that alone is probably one of the greatest successes that we could have had, because it brought back then the liberty movement. And I really want to drive this home for people that are new to the liberty movement in Idaho. Back then we worked together, we understood each other, we kind of had a respect for each other, and we didn't really fear being stabbed in the back by some other group or somebody, some other thing. And I honestly see a lot of that now, and I really don't like it. And it's really made me mad, which is why I want to, talk to people like you that have been active some time ago, to be able to try to see if we can do a reset and go, look, man, I mean, if we're going to be moving forward, we're going to have to do so in a way that we did back then. I mean, you had the Oath Keepers, and then you had the Tea Parties, and then you had the Lightfoot Militia, and then you had all of these different groups, and JBS is in there somewhere and all that. But collectively, we whether we acknowledged each other or not as groups, we were part of a collective success to be able to help usher in, I think, what we're seeing right now with the global awakening, right? We think that all of our activities are just about Boise or just about Ada County or just about Idaho. And it was kind of funny. I was listening to who's the guy from New Zealand? I can't remember his name. He came here and spoke a lot. Anyway, he said in his Kiwi accent, I can't repeat it because I'll embarrass myself. He said, "Do you know why I'm here?" And none of us really did. And he said, "Because the eyes of the world are looking on you to be able to see how you react to what is happening in your country." And he helped me understand that the actions that you and I are doing, although you and I feel that they're insignificant, which I know that we felt that way before, is part of a grand scheme of a global awakening, by helping people see all of the sacrifices that we've made by doing the things that we did. Wouldn't you agree?
You know, so being destroyed, you got to understand nothing's forever this week, but it's going to change next week, and that gives you hope.
Yeah.
You know, to weather and be still standing. You know, and be where you're called to be at those times. So, you can't not acknowledge that.
Yeah.
Things change, and they've changed now. Now it's a new world again. So it's like, wow.
Yeah, it is. And I think a lot of people are saying they never imagined that they would see anything like this in their lifetimes.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
So it's really
Yep.
amazing. So if you had to, looking back to when you were involved, and looking, I'm sure you still pay attention to whatever it is that you're doing. Are you politically active now, Lynn?
Not really. No, no,
Okay.
no.
So, but you probably have some thoughts, either that you want to keep to yourself or that you'd share with us, about some of the obstacles that you see that are in our way of the movement as it continues. How do you feel about that? Do you have any, are there obstacles that you see, things that you wish that were different?
I can relate back to just the one we just went through, the epidemic, so to speak, the
Oh,
pandemic,
pandemic.
and the amount, the reaction to that was astounding to me and to everybody. And like, wow, and they got the goods on us. That I mean, they got away with it for a while, and now it's coming circle again. Like, okay, did we learn anything that time? Did we gain anything? And so, that was an astounding lesson right there to me. Like, wow. And so, my wife and I, we resisted. We did not ever get the jab, and I got sick, but got through it. But that was going to happen anyway, you know.
Mm,
And
mm,
so, and now we're kind of the minority. Like, okay, yeah, that's interesting, you know. And we had a lot of pressure on us, you know. Why didn't we go along? No, we're not going to go along, and we didn't. So there's still a call for that. Still a call to be tuned in to, you know, what's going on, and in all the ways. You know, I mean, not that Donald Trump's going to be perfect about anything, but yes, at least he's making direction, you know, and we got to be on our feet no matter who's there, and we still have the Second Amendment.
yeah, yeah. When everything else goes bad, we still got that,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. That's a good call. I was it's been really funny for me when I look back at learning and reading, and to the point where I started speaking in public, and like we all did, right? I mean, we never thought of
Yep.
ourselves as public speakers, right?
Yeah.
And all of a
Right.
sudden we've got somebody going, "Hey, we need to give you the microphone." And you're like, "Whoa, wait a minute." I remember speaking neoconservative principles, at the State House before I had a rude awakening, going, "Oh my gosh, I have to completely shift my worldview." My feeling was
Yeah.
right and my assessment was right, but the things I
Yeah.
was talking about weren't right. And so some of my old videos from 12 or 14 years ago, I'm a little embarrassed about, but
Now. Yeah.
it shows that it was a learning experience. And part of these interviews is to answer a question that I get most often when I was traveling around the multi-state area and with JBS is, Tom, I just don't understand it. You're everywhere. You do so much. How is it that you do what you do?
Yeah.
And I think the revelation that I'm getting from a lot of these interviews, as I think I already knew, is I'm not special in the fact that I just woke up one day and I'm like, wait a minute, I just can't continue to live my life without being involved in trying to find a solution. And we all
Yeah.
have that. We all had that
Yeah.
time where, something happened and we shifted gears and we're like, wait a minute, we just can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that that is a great message for me to be able to share with people that are trying to figure out how to get involved. So when you got involved, people just didn't know you as Lynn, right? I mean, you got involved, people didn't know who you were.
Mhm.
So what
Yeah.
did you start doing? Did you start going to other groups like I did?
Not really. I'm trying to remember back how that happened, but you know, somebody to step forward and be a leader, you know, and just say, okay, I'll do it. And picked it up and ran with it, you know, for
Yeah.
whatever it was worth. And so, you know, and a little bit of my faith, you know, pushed me that way too. Like, you know, if I'm going to be here, what's it going to be about, you know?
Yeah.
And so I had a lot of spirituality mixed in with my leadership. Um, and I think people seen that and said, wow, there's more to just a activist here. There's some other depth here that has that counts. And I was thanked for that a lot later. You know, later on, they appreciated that perspective that I brought with me. That's who I am. You know, so
Yeah. Well, as I do these interviews, you start hearing the same thing. It's like, wow, that was just like me. Wow, that was just like me. And the other
yeah,
thing I hear too is the importance of people's faith in motivating them. You know,
yes, yeah,
you hear about MK Ultra and mind control and the pineal gland and all of these different
mhm,
weird things that are allegedly conspiracy theories. Of course, all of
yeah,
those have come true that I know
yeah,
so far. Um,
yeah,
where they really don't want they want us to be able to idolize the government as the God rather than God
absolutely.
himself, right? So,
And that, you know, that was my motivation in a bigger way, and hopefully I've expressed that a little bit too, and I think it was reflected. So yeah,
yeah,
but that was important. To that comes out if I have anything uh, in this journey, you know, at least that was hopefully observed and relevant to people's and their lives.
yeah. Well, I think that I think the sacrifices that people make should be remembered, um, because we're part of whether people know it or not. We're part of American history. We're a part of
And I
America.
think another thing too is probably jarhead dad pushing me at a young age to do what I could do, and he was very good. He was a disciplinarian, but he cut us loose to do stuff.
Mhm.
And so I guess I became a risk taker in a way, in being in business and doing things where a lot of people won't step out of that comfort zone. And so
Yeah,
my faith helped with that too. But to take risk, I think is probably one of the bigger challenges always, and it always is. But that's I kind of embraced that and was excited by that.
right. Well, it's you're a bigger risk taker than I am. I had a sudden realization. I have these self-reflection moments, right, where I think if are my actions inconsistent with my words, right? We see that a lot.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I swore that I wanted to be able to learn enough about my Constitution and about history and about the Bible and all of that, that my worldview would be rock solid, right? Or as rock
yeah,
solid as I can make it. And I had this sudden realization before I started this nonprofit, which somebody told me was an entrepreneurial journey. And I thought, whoa, wait a
yeah.
minute. I'm not an entrepreneur. I mean, here I'm talking about freedom and I'm talking about liberty and I'm talking about independence and I'm talking about going your own way. And I realized that throughout my whole life, I've needed a safety blanket. And my safety blanket was I realized that I'm just going to work for somebody else my whole life. I just
Yeah.
wasn't going to go off on my own. And so the first time that I ever decided to go off on my own is probably a couple months ago as I started this journey. So we'll have to see where it ends up.
About me, and I've always had the most respect for the old West. The cowboys, the loggers, the miners. They lived it and they took the risks and they had to. And so that really pulls me. I mean, they went out and did it and made things happen that we benefit from today.
Right.
So
For sure.
that's
Well,
that's my heritage in a way. That's drawn me.
right. Well, as we wrap up here in a couple minutes, I had a couple more questions. Not to sound formal or anything, but um, in an effort to mobilize and encourage other people, I felt like I needed to ask the question that if you had a message to your viewers, if they watch this video, I should say when they watch this video, sorry. If you had a message with everything that you've learned to people that wanted to get involved and didn't know how, what kind of message do you think you'd send them?
Just to be there's relevance in our world, and you have to look for traction to where that takes off. And there might be a you know housewife battling fighting with a school board and saying, this is not right for my kids. Dang it, I'm going to do something about it. And they do, and they're powerful. I mean, that's huge. Don't get in front of a mother; you're going to get hurt.
That's right.
uh,
Hell hath no
but
fury.
yeah, but and so and people, right or wrong, they get drawn into that. But they, if they have that basis, that heartfelt belief that what they're doing is right, and they understand where that foundation is, then you got all the tools you need. It's not going to be mapped out for you, but look at the lay of the land and figure it out and go for it.
I always tell people, the way I got to where I am is because I decided that I was going to put one step in front of the other
Yeah,
until, and if I saw, one of the federal government's greatest phrases was, "If you see something, say something." Right?
yeah,
I mean, we make fun
yeah,
of them for saying all that, but it's true, right? I mean, all it takes for somebody to become active is to be able to identify something that needs to be identified and
yeah,
identify it. And
yeah,
I've even gone so far as to say, and I'm still thinking about this to see if it's really true, but I believe that it is. And I believe that America, with every abuse that's not identified that we let go,
yeah,
it lowers the bar of who we are as a nation.
totally.
Even in the most simple terms, uh, uh, and you can pick whatever it is. I commonly will say, if you go to a restaurant and you expect something done a certain way, and it's not done, and you don't address
Yeah,
it, then you are responsible for allowing that kind of thing to continue, right? And it
Yeah.
goes with behavior and the rest of that too, which is why I think the people of faith are more concerned about the nation because we see things from a much deeper level, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So, um, if somebody came up to you and asked you, what the best way is to get involved, what would you tell them?
Well, what's happening in your neighborhood right now that needs direction? And you don't have to go very far, to see what's needed. It's right here. And that's been my challenge as far as being a local, and that's probably one of the things that bugged me back when um, my world was so big, country wise. I didn't really focus in, just like uh, understanding, spent all the time I did like in McCall, and their community has to make sense because it's geographically limited. And when I moved to the valley, I thought, wow, we're like a bunch of Bedouins and a tumbleweed. Geography makes no sense around this place. You can
Mhm.
go here and go there, and it's like, wow, how do you tie it all together? And so it was that took an adjustment for me to just understand, like, how do you get your hands on this? Where a small mountain village makes sense. This valley was a challenge.
Wow. So, so there are people that find themselves on a mission or on a journey. Um, are Do you find yourself on one of those currently? And what mean by the question is there something that the viewers of this interview can help you do? In other words, if there's something that you need help with, is there something you need help with? And if there is, what can we do?
Not really. I mean, just understanding your community. Communities to me is everything, and being effective in that. And I still participate in some community, like preparedness groups and just people paying it like me that pay attention. We're like-minded people. And so that's important. And just tie in, and be a voice in that setting, and it'll grow. If it's going to have wings, it'll happen. You know.
For sure, for sure. Well, and I will usually finish by asking people if they have um, and usually if you have a mission, so you don't have to answer this or not, but I did want
Yeah,
to give the opportunity.
sure.
If people are interested in contacting you, or if they're interested in getting involved in something, do you have websites or contact information that you
No,
feel like
I
would
don't
be
have
useful?
anything
Okay.
like that anymore. Nothing. Yeah, it's just me, myself, and I, and the dogs, and yeah, and,
Well,
and my dear wife that supports me so well. So yeah,
well, I wanted to say that Lynn, it's been a pleasure to chat with you again. It's been a pleasure to get to know you. You have definitely been a leader amongst people that probably never told you that. I'm one of those people. We attend quietly, we leave quietly, and we don't say anything, and whatever. But you're one of the important ones, man. You were important to me, and I know that you were important to a lot of other people. So I want you to know that the tribute in the interview is a lot deeper than that, especially on a personal
well,
level for
thank you.
me. Whether I
Yeah,
posted them on YouTube or whether I decided to
mhm,
keep them for myself,
yeah,
this is going to be a coveted set of videos for me because I feel like I've aligned with some of the best people in Idaho, and you're definitely one of those people.
and again, family, and that's so valuable. And again, like I said, my wife has been so supportive, and when we're so like-minded, and that's a big deal. That is a big deal. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Well, I just want you to know, man, you haven't been forgotten, okay?
Okay. Thank you.
All right. God
Yeah.
bless you, my friend. Hopefully, we get to chat with you again sometime.
All righty.
All
Take
right.
care. Yeah.
Appreciate it, Lynn.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.